Hello everyone, it's Becky here and welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the new video. Today is the October 1st by the time I'm recording this, which means I'm super excited because the October is here and that also means that Victober is here. And this time we are actually celebrating the 10th Victober, which is absolutely wonderful. And for those of you who are new to this term and who don't know what Victober is, basically Victober is this readathon in which we are celebrating Victorian literature and we are trying to read as many books from this time period as possible. And I will link all the wonderful hosts and also all the prompts to the box below. And again, for those of you who are new to this, the prompts, they are basically little, for example, guidances, you can call it, which could help you to choose the books you are reading, such as, for example, you can read a book which is not necessarily a novel, but it's, let's say, play or short stories. You can read a book where friendship is featured, and so on and so forth. And this year, for myself personally, I am not necessarily going with all the prompts because I do have quite a lot of books which I want to read, but I know that some of them are fitting into some prompts, but I went rather with some books which I had the feeling that I do want to read for a longer time, or I was literally keeping them for reading in Victober, and which I also have physically in my bookshelf, except two ebooks, but I will get to those. And I will just start without further ado. And the first two books I would like to introduce to you are by Wilkie Collins. And I have read Woman in White, I think it was 2 or maybe 3 years ago by this point, and I absolutely fell in love with the book and also with the author's writing. And this year I'm reading, in Slovak it's called Strašidelný hotel, in English I think it's called Haunted Hotel. And basically it's a story about, I believe this hotel is set in Venice, if I'm not incorrect, and it's a ghost who is haunting a hotel or not. The point of the book is to discover whether it is a ghost or if there is some other mystery going on, and apparently it should be quite a good one. And the reason why I'm excited about this one is that this book is from 1966, so no, it's not a Victorian time period. However, this book gives me certain vibes because the pages are very yellow, they have the significant smell, and oh, actually they even have certain holes, which I do not really know how they got there. But I remember having this book on my bookshelves for literally ages because I believe this belonged to my dad at first. And fun fact, I discovered only this year, I believe it was the beginning, that the author was Wilkie Collins, because I never really even checked who wrote this book. And then I saw it and I was like, okay, wait a second. And I wanted to read it, but I was keeping this for Victober this year. So this is the first book I'm reading. And then the other one is also by Wilkie Collins and it's called The Moonstone, which I heard wonderful stuff about. And this is the book which I purchased in one secondhand bookstore in Vienna, and it was one of 2 English books I managed to find there. So that was exciting, and immediately as I saw it, I thought of the Victober. And this should be a little bit different from the books I normally read because this is on the edge of maybe a detective story. I don't know if I can call it a thriller as well. However, this should be about a very special diamond who was stolen from India and was gifted to one young lady to her birthday. And the day it was gifted, it also disappeared again. So there is this mystery, what actually happened, why it disappeared, who took it and why. So I'm quite excited, and I heard very good things about this book, and I read approximately 40 pages in. I'm approximately 40 pages in. I started to read it yesterday and I already liked one of the characters. So this sounds really good to me. That's the second book. And the third one I have is by one of my favorite authors, by Bronte, and it's called Shirley. And I actually have 2 pieces of this. It's one book, but it's separated sorry, it's separated into the 2 books, and it's also from 1970s, and this belonged to my granny at first, and it's written in Slovak, which as I probably forgot to mention, but this one is in Slovak as well, which I'm quite excited about because it's been literally ages since I read books in Slovak, because nowadays to be honest with you, I probably should not say this, but I really do enjoy reading books in Slovak which are like this from maybe 70s or 60s or even older, because I do enjoy the way Slovak language was used in those times and the words which we not necessarily use as much anymore. And I personally do find it a big difference between books which are written in these days with current language and then which were written like 50-60 years ago, and I do prefer to read older books. So I'm excited to read this. And it's also funny to me that I haven't read Slovak book so long, or book in Slovak so long, and now I'm reading actually 2, well technically 3, but still 2. And Shirley, that also should belong to one of the prompts. I believe it was the first one to read a Victorian book where friendship is featured, because this should be about 2 friends, 2 women, one of which is very independent and apparently the other is not, and the book should explore the woman role in a society and also some political background, and it sounds just very good to me. And honestly, I feel like I don't necessarily need to know more, because I just love Charlotte Bronte and all the Bronte sisters books and writing, so I think I'll just enjoy it. Although I must confess, I really dislike this paper cover. Yeah, and it's quite creepy because look at this, it seems like those 2 dots are going into women's eye, like and it's the same with the second one. Oh no. Anyway, okay, so that's another book I want to read. And with this one I really do want to have a little discussion with you, if possible, and that's Dracula. I'm going to be rereading this because I have finished this book for the very first time last year. I believe it was in June or July when I read this, and I do love a Dracula stories. I love the movie adaptations, and I always wanted to read the book. However, I think I mentioned this in a couple videos ago, maybe even a few years ago, that I started to read this book I think twice, and I was very young, and then I always got to the point when there was the baby scene at the beginning, and I always was like, no thank you, I don't want to continue reading this. But last year I finally got some courage and I read it, and I absolutely loved the writing and I loved the story. Although the biggest disappointment of my life was discovering that the line "I crossed the oceans of time to find you" belonged only to Gary Oldman in the movie adaptation by Francis Ford Coppola, and it was not originally featured in the book, and that broke my heart. But despite this, I absolutely enjoyed and I loved the book, and the reason why I picked it up and I really want to read it is that it got to my attention that apparently Luc Besson, who is one of my, well, I really like his films, let's say it this way. I really like Luc Besson's films, and now he apparently made a new movie about Dracula. And Luc Besson is someone I don't think I would expect to have Dracula movie filmed, so I'm very curious. But what is even the bigger deal for me, and this is where I'm getting to the point and I want your opinion on this, because somehow in my Instagram reels one jumped at me, and this was sort of like a edit or compilation somebody did about like the most romantic scenes from that new movie, and especially the scene when, and if you ever seen any Dracula movie, and if you are a fan, you absolutely know what I'm talking about. You know the scene when he finally sees her after all this time and their eyes meet. This scene I'm talking about. And I saw this scene from the new movie, from the Luc Besson, and I fell in love with this, and it literally feels like my whole existence was just waiting for this moment and this scene in this version being on the silver screen. And somebody edited it in the way on this Instagram reels that you have all this selection of the romance scenes from the movie, with this one especially. And as a background they chose Caribbean Blue by Enya, and that was like the most perfect scene I ever saw, and it just made me so happy and so filled with love and expectations, and I'm so obsessed, and I cannot wait to see the movie, because I do believe it came out actually in July in 2025 in France. However, I still haven't seen it here anywhere. Like, I haven't heard of it in Slovakia, and I haven't heard of it here in Austria until literally a few days ago when I saw the reels on Instagram. And when I saw it, I was like, okay, I need to reread this book. And also, I really want to know, am I the only one who saw this and is absolutely obsessed, or have you seen it as well? Or have you seen the whole movie? Let me know in the comments, please, because I'm dying to see it. I really want to see it. And also, I never seen the main guy featured in any other movie before, but he seems to be very good in it. So let me know if you saw it and if it's a really good movie, because if not, I would be very sad. But that's also the reason, to get back to the point and to the Victober, this is why I do want to read also Dracula in my TBR for Victober, because I just really do want to read that story again. So those are my physical books, my friends, and then I have 2 more books which I would like to read, and I have them as ebooks, and one of them actually fits into the prompt of reading a book which is not a novel, at least I believe so. It should be like a short stories. And that's Gothic Tales by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I have never read anything by this author, which I know is a huge shame, and I've been meaning to for years literally, but hopefully this year I'll manage to do it. And I think that many of you knows this this book. It's basically the collection of shorter stories which have very much Gothic-y, horror-y vibes. And although I do not normally read this type of stories, I'm quite curious to read this one because it's a part of the Victober to read Elizabeth Gaskell, I believe. And I was deciding between this and also some of her other books, but then I decided to go with this one because I feel like I do have quite a chunky stack for the Victober of the books I do want to read, and I do want to read at least some of the short stories, even if I, for example, would not have time to read all the books. I do want to manage to read at least some of the short stories, and I think that's more doable than reading the entire book, for example, like North and South and stuff. And then the last book I would like to mention is called The Portrait of the Lady by Henry James, and I haven't actually known this book before. It only got my attention because some other booktubers were talking about it this year, and I'm very much intrigued because this sounds like something I would very much love. Honestly, just the cover of the book and literally just the title, that's something that's really for me. But also it seems to be a story of a young woman who is American, and she came to the Europe with her aunt, and she's quite, I think, strong-minded and she has strong opinions, and she declined 2 marriage proposals, which is something I quite like from this era when women used to be like this in books. However, then she meets someone who is very much interesting for her, and she's very intrigued by him, but I think that the love story is actually not going to be a very happy one. So this sounds really good to me. I personally do not really watch rom-coms, and I do not really read current romantic stories. However, you know, when it comes to stuff like this, like Dracula or Bronte sisters, or even Jane Austen, or then stories like this, that's something I very much like, and I'm very curious to read those. And I think, my friends, those are all the books which I wanted to talk to you about. I'm hoping to read majority of them because my year has been full of reading slumps. I'm doing well now, but I'm very much aware that Victober is going to be quite packed with all of the books, but I'll do my best to finish all of them. And I would very much love to hear from you, my friends, if you are participating in Victober, and which books are you reading, which book are you most excited about. And yes, hopefully I will see you soon with another video. Take care and enjoy Victober. Bye bye!